I'm Suzanne Ludlow, the city manager. City staff are here to serve you and to implement the policies of the city council. And the city council are here to hear from the residents of Takoma Park about the vision ahead. And to get us started this morning, I'd like to introduce Kate Stewart from Mayor.
Thank you very much, Susie. And welcome, everyone, to our first community conversation. We picked affordable housing, and I am so glad that all of you could come out today. On behalf of myself and the Takoma Park City Council, who I'd like to just introduce to make sure you know where to find them, we have Peter Kovar from Ward 1, excuse me, Tim Mail from Ward 2, Rizzi Qureshi from Ward 3, Councilmember Terry Siemens, Councilmember Fred Schultz, who are with us today. And thank you. We are all just so grateful that you could be with us today. Our goal with these community conversations is that every few months to bring together experts in the field, our city staff, and residents to take a deep dive into issues that really matter to the community. And we picked affordable housing as our first topic because in Takoma Park, we are dedicated to being a diverse and inclusive community. And to ensure that we are a diverse and inclusive community means we need to make sure we have a variety of housing options in our community. And as we change and grow, we need to make sure that each of our residents have the options of having a stable, safe, decent place to call home. And as we look to the future, starting with an examination of our current policies, goals, and practices, and then looking to what new strategies we can undertake is probably a good place to start. And that's what we're doing today. Today is a start. We're going to take a closer look first with our first panel at what we're currently doing in the city and some trends in the city and around the region. And with the assistance of our panelists today, we'll be able to then take a deeper dive when we go into the small discussion groups and think about issues like what are some of the things we need to change in our current policies and what are some new programs that we might want to undertake in the city. So today, I'll just let you know how the day is going to go. First, we're going to have a series of presentations by our panelists. These will be pretty quick presentations with a lot of information. So I hope everyone got a chance to get a cup of coffee and you're ready to pay attention. We're going to go through the presentations and then afterwards have questions. In your packet, there's a place that you can write down questions. Many of our experts are kind enough to spend their Saturday with us, and so when we break up into small groups, that will also give you an opportunity to ask questions. So we'll have panelists, then we'll break into small groups. One group will discuss current policies, changes that we need, and that practices that we're doing now. The other group discussion will focus on new ideas that we could adopt in the city. And so we ask you to pick either A or B, and when we get to that part, we'll give you instructions on where to go. Then after our small group discussions, we're going to come back together again this afternoon, review what the small groups came up with, their ideas for moving forward. And then we'll have an opportunity this afternoon to hear some words from our city council as we think about moving forward. After today, that's when the work for us on the city council and the city staff really start. We will take what you've said today, our conversations, think about the findings of that, and then work towards what are the strategies we need to put in place to ensure affordable housing in our community. So I think before we begin, I just want to, because people may be coming in and out today, I want to extend a thank you, first to our staff. You know, as a new mayor coming in November, you have a lot of ideas. And a new city council, we have a lot of ideas. And we want to put them in place right away. And the fact that the staff was able to pull together such an amazing group of experts to speak with us today and organize this half-day event on a Saturday so soon after we all took office, I think is just a testament to their dedication and what a wonderful staff we have. And I'd like to particularly thank Sarah Daines and the Housing Department for all their work. So. I'd like to also thank all our panelists who are with us today, who you'll get to meet, and to thank all of you who have come out on a Saturday morning, and as Susie said, and actually a nice Saturday morning, to sit in an auditorium and think about these issues. If you need anything throughout the day, city staff and council, we all have these badges on, so please find one of us and we can answer your questions. So I think with that, I will introduce our first group of panelists. We have Sarah Daines with our city's Housing and Community Development Department. Ms. Daines is the director of the Housing and Community Development Department. Prior to joining the city in 2002, she worked in the same capacity in Minnesota and Iowa, where she was responsible for a variety of programming ranging from affordable housing and property management to economic development, community planning, and historic preservation. In her current position here in Takoma Park, she's responsible for the administration of the city's rental housing program, its landlord-tenant services, and a number of affordable homeownership initiatives. And then we'll also hear from Mario Cristaldo, organizer here in Takoma Park. Mario works as a community organizer for the city in the Tenant Capacity Building Initiative. For 8 years, Mario worked for MANA, a nonprofit housing developer that focuses on home ownership opportunities for low and mid-income families. He was in charge of coordinating tenant purchase projects and community relations. And we also have Roseanne Look, who is also an organizer here in the city of Takoma Park. Roseanne is the director of project development for MANA. She manages an annual real estate development pipeline of 60 to 90 units and has experience in rental, single-family, condominium, and cooperative development. And she also staffs the tenant organizing and capacity building program for the city. And then we have Lisa Govani. She's a research planner with the Montgomery County Planning Department. And prior to starting this position in January 2016, Lisa was a planner at the Delaware State Housing Authority, serving as the primary research and GIS contact for housing-related issues. And so this will be our first panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have asked Lisa to join us this morning to help inform the conversation, to provide a framework from which to go forward and evaluate our existing program and consider options for new policy or directions or programs that will perhaps be a better fit for the community. So with that, we've asked her to give us an overview of what Takoma Park looks like, what its housing market is, and how it compares to the surrounding area, primarily Montgomery County. So with that, Lisa?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Gavoni. Good morning. Sorry. Yeah. Next? Okay. Okay. So this is basically the first thing I've done as the housing planner for Montgomery County. So thank you all for welcoming me. I've been here for, this will be, today is actually exactly a month. And a week of that was a snow day, so we'll see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about housing characteristics in Takoma Park. Most of this data is from the ACS, which is the American Community Survey, which is a product of the Census Bureau, and they give out 1, 3, and 5-year estimates. So first we're going to talk about household income. Takoma Park has a median income of around $78,000, which is lower than Montgomery County as a whole, but it's still significantly higher than the United States average, 25% higher. So it is still a high income area. For housing tenure, Montgomery County as a whole kind of mirrors the United States, which has a homeownership rate of 64%. Montgomery County has 67%, but Takoma Park itself has an even split between renters and homeowners, with 52% owning and 48% renting. The HUD area median family income is an estimate that HUD puts out every year annually that allows them to calculate the fair market rents for each jurisdiction in order to find the income limits for various HUD programs. Now, Takoma Park, their owner-occupied households, they pretty much have a similar rate between the Montgomery County and Takoma Park. Most of the Takoma Park homeowners and Montgomery County homeowners earn well above the median income or at it, whereas only about 12% of Takoma Park homeowners earn below 50% of the area median income. For renter households, Takoma Park tends to have a lower median income than Montgomery County as a whole, with over 50% of renter households earning less than 50% of the area median income. So every year, the DHCA puts out an annual survey of all multifamily rental units, and these are not all inclusive. It's most of them, but it has to have 2 or more rentals, and it doesn't include a lot of conversion units. But so 2014 had about 799 units, and they found that in Takoma Park, that the rents were much lower than Montgomery County as a whole. That an average 1-bedroom in Montgomery County was about $1,300 compared to, an average 1-bedroom in Montgomery County was $1,300, which is the same as about a 3-bedroom in Takoma Park. So that's substantially different. For gross rent, Takoma Park has a gross rent of about $500 less than Montgomery County as a whole, and you can really see the disparity when you look at who pays more than $1,500 or more. So over half of Montgomery County residents, 57%, paid more than $1,500 in rent, compared to only 15% of Takoma Park residents pay that in rent. For home value, you kind of see the differences between homeowners and renters in Takoma Park and Montgomery, because Takoma Park actually has a higher home value median than Montgomery County as a whole. Takoma Park has a median home value about $475,000 compared to about $450,000 for Montgomery County as a whole. 46% of all Takoma Park homes have a value over $500,000. So housing analysts suggest that for cost burden, which is 30% or more of your income, which includes not only rent but also utilities and taxes, not be dedicated more than 30% should not be dedicated to housing. And renter households in Takoma Park are less severely cost burdened than county renters, but you can also see that they are more severely burdened than homeowners in Takoma Park. For physical characteristics of the units, Takoma Park, like Montgomery County, even more so, is primarily one-unit detached single-family homes, whereas the renter-occupied housing units tend to be a mix between, while they're mostly 50 or more units, they also have a lot of 2 to 9 units, which is characteristic of Takoma Park, which tends to have a lot of older housing stock. So that's an important distinguishing factor between renter and owner-occupied units. For the number of bedrooms, Takoma Park and Montgomery County, most of them are over 80. Okay, sorry. For the number of bedrooms, Takoma Park, like Montgomery County, they tend to have 3 bedrooms or more, with 80% having more than 3 bedrooms, where renter-occupied units, like the county, there tends to be 1 or 2 bedrooms with a smaller amount of 3-bedroom units and some efficiencies. And finally, which I think is the most fascinating part of the physical characteristics, is Takoma Park's housing stock tends to skew a lot older than Montgomery County as a whole. Montgomery County as a whole, they tend to have a lot of newer buildings built in 1980, where only Montgomery County, where Takoma Park, after 1980, you only have 10% of units built. Same for renter-occupied. Almost half of owner-occupied units were built before 1939, and similarly, almost half of the buildings for renter-occupied were built between 1940 and 1959, which shows a larger, older housing stock. I think that's it.
We've decided to stay at the table rather than speak at the thing, because we're going to go back and forth a little bit. So I'm hoping that this will work. And I just pointed at it, right? Point at Rob. Okay, I can do that. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. The City of Takoma Park, the council has periodically gone through and reviewed its housing programs and developed, modified its housing policy statement over time. The last time we had a conversation along these lines was back in 2009. And as you can see, it focuses on both public and private efforts to preserve, protect, and develop both livable, sustainable, and affordable homeownership and rental opportunities. This policy has been used to drive the programming that our department and the city as a whole has been providing since that time period. And this is one of the policies that we hope that you will consider as you go through the rest of the morning in terms of, is this an appropriate fit? Are the programs that we're offering meet this priority or policy statement? And if not, how might it be changed to better fit the needs of the community? One thing I wanted to point out, and then in support of the city's commitment to providing affordable housing, is that we have dedicated not a huge amount, but a significant portion of the city's general fund budget revenues towards programs that support affordable housing and other housing-related activities. So of our general fund budget of $15.9 million, that includes property taxes, intergovernmental revenues, interest, fines from tickets, things like that. $1.1 million are focused on a variety of different program activity. And that ranges from code enforcement to the payment in lieu of taxes that I'll be talking about in a moment. As Lisa's indicated, a significant portion of the City of Takoma Park's population are renters. And the council has expressed a great commitment to providing those individuals with the resources they need to become more engaged in the community and in civic activities. So we've established a tenant capacity building program, and I've asked Mario to join us this morning to provide an overview of the program and how it benefits the residents and supports the city's ongoing housing directives.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. The City of Takoma Park Capacity Building Initiative was established in 2003, and basically this is an initiative that became a program more specifically, and this is to assist residential tenants to organize in tenants association and existing tenants associations to continue to serve the purpose of those tenants associations. So the capacity building program is coming in with 2 city organizers and engaging at any level, including organizing the association, navigating the regulatory process, and also building up their capacity toward training and leadership development. And those are some of the things that we've been working on with the initiative, this initiative. In building capacity, I want to add that most of the buildings, the rental buildings, we already have a great number of people with great capacity to navigate the process. But when we come in, we try to bring them together into these groups to organize as a tenant. And that's the positive impact that we create with this program. Some of the residents, they don't even know each other after living 10, 15 years. And then when there's a big issue in the building is when they come in and try to organize. But in the meantime, coming together and organizing and navigating process, that's the main thing that we do. One last thing that I want to add up is the fact that we organize in a way that we help the tenants engage with city government, with landlords, with property managers, whatever their issues might be. So that's basically my part. Thank you.
Did you want to give some examples?
Well, with the capacity building program, one of the things that we find is an important issue for tenants is code enforcement, that there are problems in their apartments that don't get fixed. And so we found that the county has inspections, but the tenants don't know when they're going to happen, and so they often aren't able to figure out how to interact with the code inspections. So we had a very simple solution, was to send out letters to tell the tenants when the inspection is going to happen, and then to work with them prior to the inspection to help them write down things so that they'll be prepared for when the code inspectors come. And so that's a real simple thing that we could do, but it's made a huge difference with tenants getting things repaired in their buildings. A second thing that we've done is that we've helped tenants get pro bono attorneys so that if they do need an attorney to represent them in various things, that they have that representation. And also we've gotten pro bono accountants when landlords had filed for fair return petitions. The accountants helped the tenants see whether or not all the things that were in the petition were accurate.
Thank you. We've also expanded the tenant opportunity to purchase, or excuse me, the capacity building program to help with the city's homeownership efforts as it relates to the rental community. And Roseanne's just going to give you a quick overview of the tenant opportunity to purchase legislation that we have in place. It mirrors that the county has, but they're a little, as we are Takoma Parks, we have our extra bells and whistles associated with it.
So if a landlord wants to sell their building, they have to give notice to the tenants, and then the tenants can basically assign their purchase rights to another developer if they choose, or they can exercise those rights themselves. And we've had a combination of that happening a lot of different ways. A couple of times tenants have actually purchased their building and converted it into a condominium. Other times the tenants partner with a nonprofit developer, and the developer will negotiate certain repairs, certain promises about rent levels in return for the tenants assigning their rights to the tenants. And then in other examples, the tenants are able to negotiate how the renovations are going to be done. And we found that it's been a very good working relationship, not always without its hurdles to get over, but that overall it's been a positive relationship with tenants partnering with nonprofit developers.
Mm-hmm.
The other program that the city has undertaken to promote homeownership and to provide people with the tools they need to acquire a property is our first-time home buyer workshop programs. Individuals come into this building, attend a 5 or 6 hour workshop, and by the time they're through with that, they are certified and are able to apply for mortgage programs that are available through the county, the state, and the federal level. We generally offer these twice a year and have folks, about 15 people participate in those workshops. Unfortunately, we have not been able to track how many of them have actually gone on to acquire a property or a home, but perhaps Dan will, in the upcoming panel, will be able to give us a sort of a snapshot of the challenges of buying a property in Takoma Park. We have many housing programs, and I'm hoping to just touch on some of the more significant ones that we do. For housing preservation, which was part of the city's policy statement, we have programs that are designed to address deferred maintenance issues of income-eligible homeowners. We call it the Exterior Home Repair Program. We provide grant funds and will oversee a variety of different contractors to address concerns that the property owner may not have been able to address. And everything from roofs to new doors to fixing the steps that go up to the house, putting a railing on, or taking care of the tree that is scaring them in the backyard that they're afraid it's going to fall on their house. This past fiscal year, we had $120,000 budgeted for that effort. We're looking at being able to complete 16 projects on owner-occupied homes. And over the last 4 years, we've been able to do 76 properties, 92 properties through this effort. The Public Works Department has also just wrapped up one home energy retrofit program that was funded through a grant with the Maryland Energy Administration. They received $178,000, but were only able to spend $130,000 of that due to a variety of conditions present in the homes that the applicants had to face. Apparently, if you have a lot of mold and water damage, it doesn't really help to make your home more weather tight because it just makes the problem worse. They were able to provide energy audits to 36 homeowners and do fairly significant makeovers or energy retrofits in the homes of 20 homeowners. We also provide a variety of tax assistance programs. The one that is targeted primarily to affordable housing providers is our payment in lieu of taxes, or the pilot program, and that allows the city to reduce the amount of property taxes that qualified provider has to pay to reduce their operating taxes or operating expenses, and in turn reduce the costs associated with that housing and facilitate the renovation of these properties. It's our primary and frankly the only tool that we've been able to identify to meet some of the local match requirements, some of the state programs that many of these organizations access, and perhaps Artie Harris will be able to talk a little bit more about that in one of the later panels. Right now we have 12 pilots in place, and in this last fiscal year, roughly $76,000 was reduced. $76,000 in property taxes was forgiven. We have a property tax abatement program or rebate program that is also targeted to low-income owner-occupied residents. And in this past fiscal year, we were able to reduce the property taxes of 143 homeowners who received a little over $900,000 in a rebate from the city that was to offset the property taxes that they pay to the city. This was in addition to taxes that they pay to the county and the state. One of our larger housing efforts is our licensing and registration program. We've just started registering owner-occupied group homes, and that was done in response to increasing concerns regarding overcrowding and individuals being placed in hazardous situations. So what we do is go out and inspect the building to make sure that they can get out of their bedroom, that they're not living right next door to the furnace, and that if in case of a fire that they would be able to vacate the building in a safe manner. The registration is valid for 3 years, and at this point in time we have 21 owner-occupied group homes that are registered. Our larger effort is with the rental housing facilities or rental housing licensing program, where we issue licenses on either an annual or biennial basis to a more typical landlord. The process includes they pay a per unit license fee. They have to go through this landlord certification class, which is quite informative, once every 3 years. They need to make sure that the property and their tenants are aware of the lead concerns, and the property is inspected. One of the differences between our inspection requirements and the county is that 100% of the units need to be inspected, and they are inspected every time that the license is issued. So for this past year, we had 620 properties that were licensed, which translates into about 3,300 rental units. These numbers change from day to day as people buy properties, sell properties, decide to move in, and all of that. So if you see any discrepancies in the numbers that you will be exposed to later today, that's the best explanation for that. Of the rental facilities or the buildings that we licensed, 46% of them we go out to every year, and then a little over half, 54%, are in fairly good condition and are only required to be licensed or inspected every 2 years. I just want to give you a sense of how the rental units are broken out between this. So it's really hard to read, and I apologize for that. But on the low end, a majority of the rental licenses that we issue are to single-family homes, but they make up a very small portion of the properties that we, or the units that are available. And on the other end, you can see where a significant number of our rental units are in a very handful of buildings. About 2,000 of the rental units that are available in Takoma Park are located within 28 buildings. We also have a rent stabilization program, which is a huge effort. This regulates the rent increases that landlords can apply to their tenants. It limits how frequently rent increases may be applied, and it applies to all individual condominium units and multifamily properties with 2 or more units within the building. It doesn't apply to single-family homes or accessory apartments or buildings where the owner lives in one unit and rents out the others. The law also allows us to exempt affordable housing providers from the requirements of the program in exchange for them making sure that those units are targeted to low-income individuals and that the rents are based on a percentage of the area median income. These charts are also very hard to read, but they will all be posted on the city's website so you can access them later. What I wanted to do is kind of give you a range of, or a sense of how the rents for the rent stabilized units look. And this information is a little different than what Lisa said, but it's fairly close together. So for example, for a 2-bedroom unit, the average rent in a 2-bedroom unit in Takoma Park this past year was $936. The median rent, which is more frequently occurring number, is about $1,000. The lowest rent that someone paid for a 2-bedroom unit in Takoma Park that was rent stabilized was $107, and the most someone paid was $2,300. So it's a huge range of activity. So the blue column is the average rent, the red is the median, the green is how much the lowest rent was, and the purple is the highest rent. I also wanted to give you sort of a sense of the rents and the populations that are targeted for the those facilities that have been exempted from rent stabilization. And this should give you a breakout of that as far as about 20% of the units are rented at market rates. 40% are, 11% are targeted for very low income. now I'm getting my numbers mixed up here, sorry. 14% are focused on individuals that are earning 50% of the AMI, and it goes up to where 8% of the total exempted units are targeted to individuals that are defined as being moderate income. Included in your agenda packet is a wealth of information that's been prepared by CHEER that will break this out even more as far as the rent levels and how they compare to the area and increases that have occurred over time, both for rent stabilized units as well as the others. And so with that, oh, and one last thing, and this is also available online. I just want to give you a sense of where the rental properties are located in Takoma Park. And the map is hard to read, but it is also available on the city's website.
Thank you very much for our first panel. Before we move on, since all of you are kind of on the front lines here in Takoma Park, looking at some of our housing issues, are there particular areas that you think as we go through the day and break up into the small groups, people should be focusing on? Anything in particular?
I think one of the things that is of interest to a great number of people is the city's rent stabilization program. So as you go through and look at programs that we currently provide in the city's current policy, as well as what opportunities there might be out there that other people are trying to ensure that rental units are affordable to lower income individuals, I would encourage you to think about that. Rent stabilization is based on a law that's been in place since 1981. We've gone back and reviewed it periodically. It's always there are always things that can be improved or modified to address the needs of the current community.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We will have our next panelist come up. So as I said, we're going to give you a lot of information really fast, but all of the presentations are on the city website. We have a dedicated page to the community conversation today, and so you'll be able to have a chance to go back and look at it. And many of our panelists will, again, be in the breakout sessions so that they can assist as we talk more in depth on these issues. So that was an overview of our city housing policies. Okay. And now we will have up here Vanita Myers from the Director of Housing Program at CHEER to give us the renter's perspective on housing. Peter Aaron, who is a landlord here in Takoma Park. Dan Metcalf, who is a realtor with the Finn Family Group, who will talk about the market from a realtor's perspective. And Artie Harris from Montgomery Housing Partnership will join us. I would also like to say that City Council member Jarrett Smith has also joined us this afternoon, and I thank other folks who have joined us since we began our discussion. So just to tell you a little bit more about our panelists, Vanita Myers, as I said, is the Director of Housing Programs at CHEER. Vanita is a recent recipient of Takoma Foundation's Distinguished Azalea Award, a proud Takoma resident for 14 years, and an experienced community organizer with over 17 years of experience in customer service, logistics, management, and outreach. In addition to her work as the Director of Housing Programs for CHEER, she's an active volunteer in her community and a Coulter Commissioner for the City of Takoma Park. Peter Aaron is a longtime resident and landlord here in Takoma Park and the father of 2 daughters. Professionally, he has worked as an inner-city elementary school teacher, a legal services attorney serving poor and indigent clients, and most recently as a clinical social worker working with low-income children and families in East Baltimore. Dan Metcalf has worked in real estate in Washington, D.C. area since 2005. And his sense of community has origins here in Takoma Park, as we all know the Finn Group, and was bolstered through his time spent in the Peace Corps in Africa. And finally on our panel, we have Artie Harris, Vice President of Real Estate and Community Development at Montgomery Housing Partnership, and also a Takoma Park resident. We're very lucky in Takoma Park to have so many people doing this work and living here. Founded in 1989, MHP's mission is to preserve and expand affordable housing in Montgomery County. Artie has a broad range of development experience, land and building acquisitions, site entitlements, senior and multifamily projects, and tax credit and conventional financing. Artie is LEED certified and has 23 years of experience developing multifamily housing and rental facilities, plus an additional 9 years of managing design and construction projects for commercial, high-rise, and industrial buildings. And so we'd like to start the panel with Ms. Myers.
Thank you. Can you go to slide 1, please? For CHEER, slide 1. That's not it. For the PowerPoint, it just says CHEER on it.
And as a reminder for folks who came in, if you do have any questions or comments, there's a sheet in your packet that you can write those down.
Did it come up? And by the way, thank you, Kate. Thank you for having me.
Well, maybe, Vanita, while we're waiting, you can introduce some of your colleagues from CHEER.
Sure. In the audience, there's Bruce Baker, the Executive Director of CHEER. Amy Byrne is new with us, and she is the Director of Housing Data, also on the first row. Kathy Porter is on the board for CHEER, behind them. And I think that's all that we have from Chair in the audience.
Terrific. And Artie, I know you have other colleagues here from Montgomery Housing Partnership.
Yes, we have in the back, raise your hand, Rob Goldman, the president of Montgomery Housing Partnership. And we have John Grill, who works in our neighborhoods group with Montgomery Housing Partnership.
Great, wonderful. All right.
Okay, the slides are up. Thank you for having me. My name is Benita Myers. I'm the Director of Housing Programs for CHEER. I'm a 15-year resident of Takoma Park, and I'm also the Tenant Association President of Park Ritchie Apartments, where my family and I have lived for the last 15 years. Slide 2, please. CHEER is a community-based nonprofit that works with residents in Takoma Park and Long Branch to help them define and fulfill community goals. In 2008, CHEER initiated a community strategic planning process that ultimately involved 160 people. This process included a series of meetings that formulated shared visions and set community goals in the areas of health, local economy, youth development, and housing. The housing group meetings involved up to 25 people at each of 3 sessions and included tenants, homeowners, private sector housing professionals, and government representatives, including 2 city council members. This group reflected the ethnic and racial diversity of our community, and tenant organizers from Casa de Maryland translated for 3 Spanish speakers in this group. 2 high priority goals that emerged from this housing group were to make housing equally available for people of all income levels, and that neighbors engage in shared projects and have opportunities to get to know each other. Slide 3, please. With these priorities in mind, CHEER Community Association was created in the fall of 2014 and works with renters in Takoma Park to help them build and maintain community and improve the quality of life in their rental communities. We do this by helping tenants start and sustain tenant associations. We also support tenants by sharing information and resources with them, providing peer support, and providing opportunities for them to get to know each other and build relationships with each other. I wanted a tenant association in my apartment building because I believe that neighborhoods and communities are stronger when every rental community has a thriving, active tenant association. I led the effort to create the tenant association in my apartment building, and I know from personal experience that it can be a long and difficult process, particularly in the absence of a building-wide crisis. The assistance CHEER Community Association provides makes it easier for my tenant association to thrive. To date, we've assisted 3 Takoma Park rental communities in this way. Slide 4, please. As part of our ongoing efforts to increase civic engagement and participation in the city, in advance of the November 2015 elections, we held 3 candidate forums in collaboration with local tenant and neighborhood associations. One was co-sponsored by Park Ritchie Tenant Association and held at Park Ritchie Apartments. Another was co-sponsored by Essex House Tenant Association and held at Essex House Apartments. And the third was co-sponsored by the Hampshire Garden Citizens Association. The questions asked of candidates were derived from issues surveys circulated throughout the community for a few months prior to the election. And the questions were based on the issues and concerns that were most important to Takoma Park residents. For renters, affordable housing and affordable home ownership opportunities were among the top issues and concerns. Slide 5, please. We provide support to renters that empowers them to self-advocate and make positive changes in their lives and communities. In August of 2015, events transpired at Hampshire Towers Apartments which resulted in drastic rent increases for some and the loss of their homes for others. Many renters in the community were shocked, outraged, and disappointed with the proceedings and the outcome. They were concerned that rent control exemptions are having a destructive effect on their neighborhoods and communities. They wanted to work together to find a solution to this problem, as well as learn why multiple properties in the city are allowed to deteriorate into very poor conditions despite the city's code enforcement policies. CHEER provided this forum for renters and began facilitating renters' protection meetings in October 2015. The participants have held 3 meetings to date. Slide 6, please. Chair has compiled some data on housing affordability in the handout that was distributed earlier. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to grab that. This includes neighborhood profiles that shows the housing and income measures for each U.S. Census block group in Takoma Park. We also looked at the affordability of rent-stabilized apartments and apartments exempt from rent stabilization. This first graph shows how many rental units are considered affordable under the Montgomery County income standards, defined by the county's Area Median Income, or AMI. You'll see that as the AMI decreases, the number of apartments considered affordable for households at decreasing income levels also decreases. For example, a Montgomery County family of 4 making 80% of the AMI can afford 99% of the rent-stabilized units in Takoma Park, and at least 65% of the units that are exempt from rent stabilization. A family from Montgomery County making 60% of AMI would only be able to afford at least 57% of the exempted units, yet would be able to afford 94% of the rent-stabilized units. It's important to note that while the AMI income limits are taken from Montgomery County, incomes in Takoma Park have consistently been, on average, $35,000 less than the county's area median income, which is $109,200 a year. Slide 7, please. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Peter Aaron. I want to thank you for that introduction. And I just want to say at the outset that, as the mayor noted, I've dedicated my professional life to serving the poor and underprivileged people, both as a legal services attorney, as a social worker, and as a teacher. And I'm very much in favor of affordable housing. I want to start out by expressing my appreciation to Ms. Jean Kerr, who's sitting back there, I believe. I just want to say that she has provided me much, and I suspect many other landlords as well, much help and much support. She keeps the wheels turning. She facilitates licensing and reporting, and it has been a pleasure working with her. So I want to start out with a big shout out and a thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Moving along to rent stabilization or rent control, I would like to be as positive, but I can't be quite as positive about that. And ask, what are the consequences of the rent stabilization program? The first thing I wanted to note is that the unintended consequence of rent stabilization program of reducing rental units in the city of Takoma Park. There was a study done by researchers at the University of Maryland in '05, and it had a couple significant findings. It said first that between 2000 and 2004, the total assessed value of residential properties in Takoma Park increased by 57.9%, while the total assessed value of apartments increased by only 8.5%. And they contrast this with Montgomery County. They say between 1999 to 2003, the total assessed value of apartment properties countywide increased by 11.8%, more than Takoma Park. And they found also that between 2000 and 2004, the share of Takoma Park's total assessed value made up by apartment properties declined by 26.7%. And they contrasted this with Montgomery County, where there was a decline of only 6% during that period. And I would say that, just add that since that study, the number of rental units in Takoma Park has continued to decline. And we could ask, why is that the case? And I believe it's the case because when rents are limited, the value of the underlying property is limited as well. And so forcing or encouraging, let's just say, landlords to take their their properties out of the rental market and to sell them, either as condominiums or to consolidate them as single-family houses. I don't believe that that was the intended consequence of rent stabilization. It certainly wouldn't be my consequence. A second unintended consequence, and I was just listening to, is it Veneta? Veneta, talking about the condition of rental property. So another unintended consequence of the rental stabilization program is the minimal maintenance of rental properties, by which I mean while the properties have to comply with code, there's very little or nothing left over to improve the properties and make them finer properties, more energy efficient, more visually, put in amenities that other properties have. There's just no, I would like to do that with my property, and there's just no money to do that because of the limitation of rents. And I don't, again, I'm not sure was supposed to be the intended consequence of rent stabilization. Third, if in fact, as the University of Maryland studies show, the assessed value of rental property in Takoma Park is proportionally less than in Montgomery County, then that means that these properties generate less taxes, with the result that other property owners in Takoma Park have to pay more taxes. And I wonder if Takoma Park residents understand this consequence of rent stabilization. I think it was Lisa from Montgomery County who spoke about, I think she said that 50% of tenants are below median income and 50% are above median income. And so while there are definitely tenants in Takoma Park who need rent stabilization, there are also tenants who don't need it. But the same program is applying to those as well as to those people who don't need it. There are a number of tenants in my building who earn more money than I do. And finally, I'll just say to use the schools as an example, and I'm a parent, and I've raised 2 girls here in Takoma Park. I and other Takoma Park parents want our children to get the best education possible. In a second, you'll see where I'm going here. To get that service for our kids, I and other taxpayers need to pay for that education. And we have paid, and we pay every year in our taxes. We can't, and we don't ask anyone else to pay for this for us. We pay for it. So the question is, how is this different from our communal desire for affordable housing in Takoma Park? Because, except that with respect to affordable housing, the city says that it wants this, and by the way, I agree with wanting this, but it doesn't want to pay for it. So what it's doing is essentially, it's different from education and actually most other municipal services for which we pay taxes. Here, the cost of affordable housing is imposed on one very small group, which is landlords. And so I question what is the difference? Why is one group, why do we agree to pay for these other things that we put value on, but we don't want to pay for this? Question. And as we know, there are costs to everything, and although we'd like it to be otherwise, and nothing is free, in the short run, Takoma Park has rent control. But in the long run, it has been, and it will continue, I believe, to lose rental units. And unfortunately, instead of our rental units, as you were saying, always being something that we can be proud of, and we want to be proud of our rental units, increasingly, they're not all rental units that we can be proud of because landlords just simply don't have the wherewithal to improve them. So I would just say that I believe, as I started off in the beginning, I believe in affordable housing. And I would welcome the opportunity to engage with this group here, as I'm doing this morning, and with the city in finding a way of providing affordable housing to people who need it. And I urge the people of Takoma Park and its representatives to take a hard look at rent stabilization and to explore alternatives to replace the current unsustainable program. Many thanks.
Thank you. Dan?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Dan Metcalf. I'm with the Finn Family Group of Long and Foster. I've been a resident here since 1987. Some of you probably know my mother, Meg Finn, who is also my business partner. So it's kind of interesting. I'm 36 years old, but in a way I've been monitoring the real estate market for 25 years. So I do have a little bit of a longer-term perspective. And I want to say, to me, as really a proud son of this city, it's so exciting to see so many people here and that this is so well attended on a Saturday morning when, as you said, you could be outside, you could be doing anything else. But I think that fundamentally, my experience has always been that affordability, diversity, and community involvement are all hallmarks of this city, and frankly, keep me in business. This is why people want to live here. And I think the density, as you mentioned, of the information we're receiving this morning is pretty amazing. These are all really important points, and I have to say, sort of like my sort of position, I see all of these perspectives. So I just wrapped up my 10th year full time doing this, although I've been licensed since 1997, and it's sort of interesting that I think that decade follows this span of time from 2006, which could be viewed as immediately post the absolute height of real estate exuberance, to the sort of Great Recession of 2008 to 2010, and then the recovery sort of therefrom. In our city, I think we saw values slough off between 8 and 10% with the crash, and then after a year or two, sort of resume the steady pace of appreciation at a rate of roughly 3%. I know that one thing that I'd say is sort of important to note is that in the last 3 years, we've seen this incredible lower inventory, extremely low interest rate cycle. And as a consequence, there's been extraordinary competition for housing on the purchase side. I will say that, sort of per Peter's point, in that contraction, I found myself developing a new specialization in getting homes ready for sale when they were sort of no longer maintained. Helping people contract and get their homes sort of ready to go, because holding them on as rental units didn't make any more sense when prices resumed. Anyway, it was interesting to note that the last two, in 2013 and 2014, we really didn't see an end to the spring market in July. And that, in some ways, I think of this as sort of like fishing or agriculture. Imagine that things just kept blooming late into the season. And in part, this was because rates were so low and inventory was so low that the buyers were not absorbed by the inventory. Finally, we saw some sloughing off in the third quarter of last year, as I think people experienced what I would call interest rate fatigue. 4% impressed me. It's been 3 years. You always say it's at historic lows. And then also there was some absorption. And then, right now, for example, like just today, there are 14 detached homes on the market in Takoma Park. All of those carry a days on market of over 18 days, which, given the Washington Post report of last night and this morning, showing that our average days on market for houses that really sell is 12 days, goes to show that all 14 of those houses are probably kind of leftover inventory. So in a way, there's no inventory. If you are seeking to purchase a detached home in the city of Takoma Park, I do think there's a process for that starts with retaining someone who knows what they're doing, but also, the fact of competition tends to be a reality. The three offers that I wrote most recently either we went under contract pre-market or in multiple offers with escalations of not less than 3 to 5%. So one thing that I've been receiving a lot of phone calls in the last month or so has been people always call me about tax assessments. And I think what's really interesting about this current assessment cycle is that, and I'll wrap up in just a second here, is that in prior cycles when people have called me about their tax assessed values and how they've increased substantially, I've been able to look at the comparables, and sometimes you can tell, like a computer has done this on the basis of some information, and there you go. And then they contact the assessor's office and they say, oh yeah, that computer's crazy. What is interesting to me this cycle, on the basis of the 7 to 12 phone calls that I've received, including one from my mother, was that, I mean, while assessed values have increased dramatically, with some exceptions, as I look at the data, they're not so far off from market value. And I mean, people are seeing increases in their tax bills, or at least increases in their tax assessed values of up to 25%. But to take a personal example, like my home is assessed at substantially more than I purchased for, and the reality is that that's probably about right. And that, in part, again, has to do with this last sort of 3-ish year cycle of lower inventory and exceptionally low interest rates. So I'm really delighted to be a part of this panel. I think it's a very important conversation for our community. I think that these core values of this community, like everybody wants to seek to honor this. I'm really excited that there's some contrasting viewpoints to be explored today. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I'd like to give an overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'd like to first talk about a little bit about MHP and what we do, and then focus on our real estate program, and then talk about some of the challenges we have in acquiring and developing affordable housing in the county, and then reach out to you and talk about how we think you can help us achieve our mission. So, as Kate said, our mission is to preserve and expand affordable housing in Montgomery County to keep our units affordable for the long term. And we do that through a holistic approach. And the first part of that approach is we house people. We own and manage over 1,500 units throughout the county. We empower families. We serve over 300 children and their families, and some of those programs include preschool programs, after-school homework programs. We also have summer camps for the kids. And for the adults, we do financial literacy, and we do ESOL classes and other types of classes like that. And our third approach is strengthening neighborhoods. It's some of the things that Cheer talked about, some that Mario talked about. We help to develop resident and community leaders in the communities we work with, and not just on the rental side, but on the homeowner in our for-sale communities throughout the county. We also help organize around community engagement, which is important. And we, in some parts, are just as small as this, helping communities develop community gardens. And we work with communities about improving physical improvements of the community. And in Long Branch, we work with the business owners to help them improve their revenue, create more demand for their services. And then on our real estate side, we work throughout the county, from down county to up county. Takoma Park is dear to us because 20% of our portfolio is here. We have over 330 units. Many of them are right on Maple Avenue, right across the street. We have Edinburgh House. This is a 45-unit building, Art Deco-looking building. Block down is 7610 Maple, was this abandoned building that we gutted and rehabbed about 3 years ago, with 36 units. And we also have some of our community life services support systems in that building. And then in 2014, we completed a major renovation of Parkview Towers, is down on Maple and Lincoln. It's a 125-unit building. All of our buildings are mixed income. They have an affordable component, which is typically between 30 and 60% of the area median income. We have a workforce component, and we have a market rate component. But they're mostly affordable, and they're mostly for families. And we follow the county's voluntary rent guidelines that Sarah had talked about before. And our bread and butter is acquisition rehab. We go in and buy older buildings and we rehab them. And we put a lot of money into rehabbing them. Also, we do some new construction. You may have seen that next to the library in downtown Silver Spring, we're building a 149-unit senior development called the Bonifant that'll open this spring. We're very excited about that. We also are working with the county to build a family community in Germantown near the Up-County Services Center. And we recently completed a for-sale community in Olney. It's a 114-unit for-sale community. It has 30% affordable, 30% workforce, and 40% market rate. We're really proud of that community. It's over a 30-acre site. The homes go for as low as $170,000 to as much as $700,000. So we think it's a really diverse community in that area that also brought some tax revenue to the county. And we're different from many private developers in that we just don't buy, make minimal improvements, and sell. Well, we buy, we make major improvements, and we keep them for the long term. Our goal is to provide long-term affordability for the residents of Montgomery County. As Lisa talked about and as Peter talked about, in order to, we have very old housing stock, especially in Takoma Park, right? And it's okay to meet code requirements, but people want a high-quality housing. So when we go in, we make major improvements, and that includes new roofs, new water and sewer piping, because over time, after 30, 40 years, and you get pinhole leaks in your copper pipes, and when you get leaks, then you get mold in the units, and residents deserve better. And it just happens. It just happens over time. If you own a single-family home, over time, you have to make improvements. So that's what we do. We go and put new HVAC systems in, heating and air conditioning systems. We update the kitchens and the bathrooms. We put modern, energy-efficient mechanical systems and appliances, and we do low-flow plumbing. So we do all that. And how do we finance? Well, like you, when you buy a home, you have debt and you have equity. We have debt and equity and many other resources. The equity is low-income housing tax credits. The other resources is called soft money, and the major supporter of the soft money for our projects is the county through their Housing Initiative Fund and also the state, many of the state programs that they have. So what are some of our challenges? Well, we live in a high cost of living area, so one of our first challenges is high land costs, high property building costs. Another is the competition. You know, we're going after the same properties that market rate developers and market rate owners are going after. So it's trying to outbid the market rate folks, which is tough. Also, it's limited funding. You know, there's always a gap. Because we want to keep the rents low, then you can't borrow as much. And because we put in a significant amount of rehab costs in our properties, there's always a gap. So, for example, in a typical building, to do what we want, it takes about $60,000 to $80,000 a unit, right? That's for major rehab. But if it's a gut rehab, it's more, and if it's new constructions, it's significantly more than that. Also, there's significant less soft funds or gap funding from one source. For example, in Parkview Towers down the street, the 125-unit building, not only did we had 7 sources, not only do we have debt, bond debt, not only we had low-income housing tax credit equity, we had money from the state, Rental Housing Works, that's the 3rd source. We have money from the county, from their HIF, that's the 4th. We have Weinberg Foundation money. Well, that's for people with disabilities to put in, you know, major handicap assistance units. That's the 5th. We had Janie Lawton funds from the state. That's for energy improvements. Then we had our own money. We had 7 sources in that. They all have their own loan documents. It gets really complicated, but that's what nonprofits do to provide affordable housing, right? That's our mission. We do it because we think that's important. Another challenge is renovating occupied buildings. That's always a challenge, and there's several ways you can do that. Some are more successful than others. Talking about community response as to what our work, we have generally favorable community response, especially when we're going and buying and rehabbing existing properties. Who wouldn't want in their community to have the property to look better? Sometimes we have some pushback when new construction is the NIMBYism, but when we can show people what we do, our mission and our successful track record, we generally have great success, but sometimes we don't. So what can you do, this Takoma Park? Well, we have several ideas here. One is help with the county, push the county to increase their housing initiative fund. It's important. The county's dedicated. That's how a big source of providing soft money for affordable housing. We would like you to also, urge the council people, urge the county executive to increase the housing initiative fund. We also think you should start your own housing initiative fund, right? I think it's important to start your own, right, to take some pressure off the county, and also you can have more direction of how funds are used. We'd like you to continue to provide pilots. That's very important for us, and increase that amount, right? Because that allows us to borrow more debt. It also allows us to keep the rents low. We'd like you to look to the county as a partner more, right? I think the City of Tacoma Park and the county, Department of Housing and Community Affairs, need to work together to solve the problems of affordable housing. We'd also like you, the county's doing this, I think it's a good way to look at affordable housing. Look to collate affordable housing on city-owned land, right? And our property, our senior deal is on county land, co-located with the library. We're doing a deal up in Germantown, co-located on county sites. I think that the county's doing the 3rd District Police Station. They're going to have affordable housing on that, the old police station site, and then in the East County Government Center, they're going to co-locate senior housing there. A couple more things. We'd like you to amend the city's right of first refusal law to be closer to the counties. For example, if a buyer agrees to meet an affordable housing standard, then we think the resident's right should go away. But if the buyer doesn't meet that standard, then the resident should have the right to purchase the building. Also, we'd like you to keep the right to allow an exemption from rent stabilization at the staff level. It's currently at the staff level, especially for nonprofits like us that have an agreement with the county that we will comply with the county's voluntary rent guidelines, and that we'll have a regulatory agreement in place stating that a portion of the units will remain affordable. I'd like to end by saying that, you're a great partner. The city is a great partner of ours, and we'd like to grow that partnership. We'd like you to learn more about MHP in a couple of ways. You can visit our website, www.mhpmontgomeryhousingpartners.org, or what we love for you to do is come on one of our tours. We do 2 tours a month of our properties, and they're generally the properties right around the corner here. For example, February 25th, we have one at Greenwood Terrace, which is about a mile from here at 8:30. We also have one at Greenwood Terrace on March 17th at 8:30, and then just 1 block down the street at our Maple, 7610 Maple, we have a tour at 1:30 on March 2nd. They're only an hour, and we like to walk you through our mission and tell you what we do and how you can help support affordable housing and our programs. So thank you, and thank you for supporting MHP.
Thank you. Thank you. And you threw out a lot of information. I really hope you all can stay, because I think this panel raised some very good issues, and I'm sure once we get into the small groups, people would really like each of you to delve deeper into what you've all raised. And so now we'd like to bring up the last panel. And just as the next panel comes up, I'm just going to put a plug in for, as Artie said, taking a tour of one of Montgomery Housing Partnership's buildings in our community. I did it with actually my daughter Bridget, who's sitting in the back. The 2 of us went last summer, and it really, going on a tour really helps you understand the MHP model much better. And I just also like to thank CHEER and MHP and the number of their staff who have joined us today, who will be able to answer questions and talk to you later. And so now our final panel, before we can get up and stretch, and then it's your job to do some of the heavy lifting. We're going to have a regional perspective and then look at new approaches. So our regional perspective, we have Hillary Chapman from the housing program of the Metropolitan Washington Council on Governments joining us today. At COG, Ms. Chapman convenes regional leaders who work directly to solve challenges of homelessness and affordable housing, and provides research and analysis to support local housing policy and practice.
Prior to joining COG, Hillary spent nearly a decade as an affordable housing developer, working with public housing authorities nationally to redevelop their most distressed housing units. And then we also have, excuse me, Peter Tanton he's a senior fellow at the Urban Institute. He is where he researches housing policy, neighborhood indicators, and community development. Peter leads Neighborhood Info DC, a neighborhood data system and civic engagement tool, which is part of Urban's National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership. He also heads Urban's work providing technical assistance on data collection and use to grantees of the U.S. Department of Education Promised Neighborhoods Initiative. And then finally today, we will hear from Chris Estes, President and CEO of the National Housing Conference. Chris began his tenure at NHC in July of 2012, coming from North Carolina, where he led the National Carolina Housing Coalition for 9 years. NHC serves as a resource for the affordable housing community on housing policy issues and research on both the challenges and best practices in affordable housing today. Chris leads NHC's strategic direction for its policy, communications, and research work, and we want to thank all of them for coming today.
Is this on? Good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm going to start by saying that I'm going to be co-presenting with Peter Tatian here, and our remarks are going to be based largely on a study that COG assisted that Urban published about a year and a half ago, and we think it's one of the most comprehensive studies of housing needs in the region. So we're going to take a step back from looking at the city and the county to look at how the housing needs across the continuum from homelessness to homeownership around the region, since this is not the issue of affordable housing, is not an issue that the city of Takoma Park can solve on its own, or even Montgomery County. I see it here at COG. We like to ask everyone to think locally, but think regionally and act locally. Gosh, I could get that wrong. My boss, who's in here in the audience right here, is hopefully not taking careful notes about that. So I'm gonna, let's see. So let's start here. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about homelessness. So those in the region who face the most significant housing needs, and then Peter is going to take it over and talk about rental and homeownership needs. So the study was based on data that were collected in 2013. And at the time, there were 11,245 people in the region who were experiencing homelessness. And about 89% of those were in shelter and 11% were unsheltered. The 2016 count, this is the 16th time that COG has coordinated a regional census of those experiencing homelessness, actually took place last Thursday. We had to postpone it by a day as a result of the recent snowstorm. And the results of that count will be published in mid-May, but sort of anecdotally, it'll probably come as no surprise that those who were unsheltered experiencing homelessness last week, the numbers will probably be down, but we're just getting started and looking at the data there. Our region follows a national best practice known as Housing First. Housing First, as it sounds, addresses ending homelessness by putting people experiencing homelessness in Housing First, and then allowing them to a stable platform for which to address their ancillary needs of maybe whether it's substance use disorder or severe mental illness, all those sorts of things. And then that has been a much more successful way to address those who may be unsheltered. In 2013, about 25% of those people who were counted were considered chronically homeless, and 68% of those individuals were staying in shelters and moving them into permanent supportive housing, sort of as shown here, which is again a process that is specifically for those with chronically homeless, putting them in homeless with supports, case management, and if we had been able to provide enough permanent supportive housing for those individuals, we would have freed up enough beds to fill the gap in immediate shelter needs. So the most important point, though, to keep in mind with regard to homelessness is that what people who are homeless need is housing. And affordable housing is the single one most greatest challenge in ending homelessness in our region. And certainly, while there is not one size fits all housing model for those who are in a housing crisis, certainly you can see from the results here, those who are chronically homeless are typically best suited and served by permanent supportive housing, whereas people and families who are experiencing homelessness are typically homeless due to economic crisis, and what they really need is affordable housing. And the lack of affordable housing in the region has had the greatest impact on this particular portion of homeless. And with that, I'm going to quickly switch gears over to let Peter talk about rental and homeownership needs in the region.
Great, thank you, Hillary, and thank you, Mayor Stewart and Director Daines for inviting us today. I wanted to just say a quick word about Urban Institute. For those of you who may not be familiar, we're a nonprofit public policy research organization based in Washington, D.C. We've been around almost 50 years now. We were started during the Johnson administration to be a non-government entity that could evaluate the Great Society programs, and we've gone beyond that initial mission now to continue to study a wide array of public policy issues facing the nation. I myself focus a lot on things going on in Washington, D.C. and the Washington region. And also want to give a shout out to a couple of my urban colleagues who are Takoma Park residents who are here today, Rolf Pendahl and Megan Gallagher, who's sitting in the audience. So, as Hillary said, yes, I'm going to switch now to talk a bit more about the rental market, and you've already heard some great data and information about that today, but looking more, again, at the regional level. So this first chart shows housing cost burdens for people and renters in the Washington region. And sort of standard definition used by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and lots of us are that if you're paying more than 30% of your income on housing costs, be that rent, utilities, mortgage payments, home ownership fees, and those kinds of things, then that housing is considered to be unaffordable and you have a cost burden. If you're paying more than 50% of your income on housing costs, then that's a severe cost burden. So we can see that there's quite a lot of people in the region who are facing a burden of some kind. Almost half of the renters in the region, specifically, many of whom are low or very low income, are struggling with high housing costs, including more than 150,000 households that have a severe housing cost burden. And so these groups that I'm showing here correspond to the same groups that Lisa was using in her presentation of data. So based on the area median income, and extremely low would be people paying 30% of area median income, which would be about $30,000 a year for a family of four, and then all the way up to the highest income level. So as we can see, extremely low renters, as one would expect, are the ones facing the most challenging housing costs in the region. Part of what we looked at in our report was what is the gap we're facing currently in terms of the supply of affordable units for different income groups. And one of the most important findings was that there is a gap across the entire region in terms of affordable units for this lowest income group, people with extremely low income in the rental market. So as you can see from this chart, every jurisdiction in the Washington region has a gap in terms of the number of available units that are affordable for these lowest income renters. The biggest gap was in the District of Columbia, over 22,000 units, and about Montgomery County has a gap of 18,200 as well. So this is a big challenge for the entire region in terms of figuring out how we provide more affordable housing to our most vulnerable renters. And part of the reason why we see this gap is because renters are facing competition for units in terms of higher income households maybe taking up some of the housing that might be affordable to lower income units. So part of the gap is explained by the fact that 40% of the units that are affordable to extremely low income renters were actually already being occupied by somebody at higher income. And so Increasing rental supply, and that's something we heard about a bit in the last panel, is one of the things that needs to happen in this region. Of course, there is a lot of building going on already, but it's really not keeping pace with the demand that's needed. So having more units to relieve some of that excess demand and help alleviate some of that competition for affordable units would be very helpful. One of the, some of the main tools we use for providing affordable housing for the lowest income renters are public housing and housing choice vouchers. Housing choice voucher is a subsidy that a household can receive. It's what's called a portable subsidy because they can take that voucher and go rent any appropriate unit in the private rental market and use that voucher to help pay the part of the rent that they can't afford based on their own income. There are about 32,600 vouchers in use right now throughout the Washington region. You can see how that breaks out across the different jurisdictions. So those housing choice vouchers are all funded by the federal government through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. But there are also some jurisdictions have funded their own local housing vouchers. Two in this region, the District of Columbia and Arlington County, are using their own local revenues to provide additional vouchers for residents to help them afford housing. And given the current budget situation and in Congress, it's very unlikely that HUD is going to get a lot more money for increasing the numbers of vouchers. So this is really the only way we can probably get more vouchers in an area is to pay for them locally. Public housing is the other big program, again, the federally funded program that provides units for extremely low-income renters. It is facing challenges as well, particularly in terms of the age of a lot of public housing stock, and we talked about age of housing as being a big challenge as well. In this chart, the other thing we looked at was then how many of those kinds of subsidies in terms of public housing and vouchers do we have versus how many extremely low-income renters are there who maybe could benefit from those programs. And we only have about one subsidy for every 3 extremely low-income renters in the region, so it's clearly not enough. So quickly now, just to wrap up, I'll talk a little bit about the homeownership market and some of the things that jurisdictions are doing to address some of these challenges. So in the Washington region, of course, as we've been hearing all morning, housing is very expensive, and for people who are looking to buy homes, it's very hard to find things that are affordable. In this analysis, we looked at a low-income first-time home buyer. So this would be, for example, in this region, a family of 4 with an income of $67,000 per year in 2011. Based on mortgage interest rates and other kinds of standard assumptions about taxes and real estate, that family could afford a home of about $254,000 in terms of price. But the average sales price in the region in 2011 was $376,000. So that's 1.48 times higher than the price that low-income family could afford. And so that's the bar you see for the Washington region, and then you see for all the other jurisdictions, almost all the other jurisdictions, it is higher than that regional average, even as high as 2 times in both DC and in Arlington. Only Prince George's County had an average that was below the price that a low-income first-time home buyer could afford. And again, that's an average, so there's going to be some homes that'll be more and some homes that'll be less. But it does kind of, I think, help illustrate the big challenges that home buyers are facing. So just to wrap up then, we also in this report looked at what are jurisdictions doing to try to address some of these challenges. We heard about some of the programs and sources of funding that Takoma Park is using. In terms of a regional context, you can sort of see here how that looks in terms of individual jurisdictions. So we looked at individual jurisdiction budgets to try to figure out what housing costs they were, what kinds of programs they were funding and where the money was coming from. And as you can see, there's a substantial amount of local funding that is being used by jurisdictions to try to address some of these challenges. So at least 33% of the spending in the region on affordable housing is coming from local revenue sources. At least another 57% is coming from federal and state sources. And all told, it's about $1.3 billion that the region is currently spending to try to address some of these challenges. Lastly, we also tried to look at some of the private philanthropic spending on housing issues. I'm sorry, before I get to that, so what are the jurisdictions spending that their own money and federal and state money on? So as you can see, a lot of it is being spent on rental assistance. Additional amounts are being spent on planning and development of new housing, homelessness prevention and assistance, and tenant-owned services, like the kinds of things, the tenant organizing that we heard about on the first panel. So this is how the money is being spent. So now we'll get to the philanthropic. So remember I said, so the public money is about $1.3 billion. In 2012, the private philanthropic giving, we looked at major foundations and other big donors. That was about $33.4 million. So considerably less, obviously, still a lot of money. But, and the priorities are a bit different for the private money. A lot of it, most of it being spent on homelessness programs, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing designed to address some of the challenges Hillary talked about that the homeless population is facing. The one last thing I'll note on this chart is that the year we're looking at here, 2012, included philanthropic giving by Fannie Mae, the Fannie Mae Foundation, and Freddie Mac, all of whom have ceased to be giving money now because of the situation they're in terms of federal receivership. So, and that's money. We've presented this report actually to a group of private foundations in the region, and the foundations were all unanimous in saying there's no way we can replace that money with private philanthropy. So there is a big gap currently in terms of money that had been going into some of these housing assistance programs through the Freddie, Fannie, and Fannie Mae Foundation that we just haven't been able to replace yet. So that remains a challenge for the region. So thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to the discussion today.
Great. Terrific. Thank you.
All right. So one of the benefits of going last is that you can kind of, my goal is to actually say what hasn't been said yet. So I'm going to offer you all a little bit of an assessment as an outsider and make talk about some suggestions and kind of encouragement for where I think you can go from here. Let me begin by thanking the mayor and the council folks here, those working on affordable housing, and all of you here today. It's really impressive to come to a local community and see this much commitment to an issue and involvement. As it was mentioned in my bio, I spent a long time working at the state and local level in North Carolina, and being at the national level, I don't get to do as many of these kind of events, and it's really fun to get connected to the real on-the-ground discussions because this is really how things make a difference. So my impression of what I heard here today and sort of assessment for you all to think about is that you guys have a strong commitment to affordability, but you are not actually doing your share of responding to the affordability crisis in the region, not because you don't care about it, but because you're not building any housing. When you look at the number of units, of rental units in your community that have been built since 1959, it's alarmingly small for a region that has grown as fast as it is. And that really is a conversation about density and growth that is bigger than just affordability and change. And that is, I think, the most emotional and can be contested local conversations, but that is the reality you're facing, and whether I say it or not, that is coming. And you have essentially kind of created a little border around yourselves and have instituted a rent stabilization policy which has done a great job of preserving affordability. So your rents look more affordable than the surrounding region, but you're not increasing your supply to meet the demand of the region. And where that really comes into play is that there is a national conversation right now around affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is about deconcentrating poverty and creating more opportunities for low-income people, particularly in areas with high-performing schools. So places like Takoma Park and Silver Spring and Bethesda and are in that mix. And so people are going to be looking and saying to places like DC and Southwest DC in particular, we want to see more opportunities in these high-performing school areas, and you all are going to face that growth pressure. So the challenge for you is to figure out how do we do this in a way that works for us as a community. And I think there are tools, and Artie did a good job of mentioning several of them around how to increase the supply of affordable housing. But it's also about understanding this notion of how we're going to grow. How are we going to, and it's not just build more, obviously. I think you and communities around you want to grow in the right way. But looking at what are our transit corridors, where are the areas where we can increase density, how do we include affordability in that? When we talk about affordability, affordable to whom becomes the really key question. You saw in Peter's slides in particular, the crisis in affordability is for those at 30% and below of area median income. And so whenever you're thinking about how do we increase stuff, that notion of how many units can we help folks produce at those levels needs to be, I think, your guiding star if you really want to be a part of helping to solve this crisis. Change is coming. We didn't really, I would encourage you in maybe other conversations to look at the regional growth numbers to see how fast this region has already grown and how fast it's going to continue to grow. And so it's up to you all in the leadership in this community to think about who do we want to be 10 years from now and how are we going to start planning for that today. We can't simply say we'd like to stay exactly as we are, but we'd like to still be affordable because the region's going to change. And so I really encourage you all to that is a bigger conversation that all of you need to be involved in and to be thinking about. There are tools to certainly do that. Thinking about dedicated revenue sources, which I think already mentioned about having a local trust fund, making it easier to build, the allowance of accessory dwelling units, using land trusts and things to provide long-term affordability. The public land dynamic and right of first refusal are all tools that allow nonprofits and others to build more easily. But a lot of it will be this notion of mixed use and mixed income. How are we going to build and allow greater density where we have retail on the lower level and housing above, and at a scale that still fits in Takoma Park and areas like that? I think that's one of the big challenges for particularly the southern Maryland region. It's not talking about building a 15-story building or a 50-story building like New York might do, but how can we make the financing and zoning and land use work for a 4 or 5-story building that has housing and retail involved in it? So that may jar some folks at times to have that conversation, but that is really, we can cut through some of the crap sometimes and just say, this is our challenge as a community and we got to figure out how to do this. And I think when you look at your housing stock, it is kind of shocking to think that a community that's this desirable has had that little growth in housing stock since 1959. And that ought to be a warning sign because if you don't do it, you're going to face this increasing pressure, which is, well, we have to let go of some of our rent control because we've got to generate more property taxes because the values are going to keep going up. And you're going to have sort of an amusement park of really nice, low-density housing in a really, really expensive community. And you don't have to look too far over to Chevy Chase to maybe see what that looks like, in my opinion. I think they're struggling with their failure to respond to density has led to them losing smaller homes in a single-family setting to bigger McMansion homes in a single-family setting. And that's not solving affordability, and that's not the real world. And it's great to live there, but that's not a sustainable future from my perspective. So the final thing I'll encourage you to do is that this has been a great conversation with lots of dense stuff, but it's really been about a lot of stats and things like area median income and units. And if you want to have a community conversation that's really going to help move people to where you need to be, you need to have a conversation about people. And thinking about the intersections of what housing means for health and education and economic opportunity and community well-being, because that's what brings people together to help solve this issue. We may be the choir and we get that stuff and it's important to understand, but your future conversations really have to connect with why this is so important. Why should I care? No one really wants change very easily, but if you're talking about what it means for people's education success or public health and community well-being, it begins to feel a lot more like we all have a stake in that. Our organization spends a lot of time thinking about how to talk and communicate about this. We do a lot of research into this housing intersection area, and we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the best practices at the regional, state, and local level for policy. So we look forward to offering all of those resources to you. And again, I want to thank you for your commitment to this issue. I will add, as a closing point, between you and Silver Spring, you may have about 80% of the folks who work on affordable housing in the DC region living in your place. And I say that in all seriousness. When I got asked to do this, we had a little discussion of all the people we could think of who could do this presentation, and we actually had to stop because we had gotten to like 20 or 25. So you have a tremendous talent pool of folks, some of whom are here today, to continue to help you with this. I also think that's a testament to the quality of life here that so many people who work on this issue have chosen to live in this region. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to all our panelists, and Chris, thank you. I think that was a great way to end all these terrific presentations, and now turn it over to everyone else to break up into small groups and take what we've seen today and start answering some of these bigger questions. And again, this is a beginning. It's a start to these conversations that we have to have. As Chris laid out, we're not going to find the silver bullet. There is not going to be a silver bullet to this issue as our community changes and grows, as this region changes and grows. But take some time, stretch. I believe there is still coffee and cookies outside. We asked you when you came in to select a small group discussion. Group A will meet in, they just left. So Group A, the staff is going to go set up the rooms. In each room, we will have a moderator and someone taking notes for you. And the group that is going to discuss current policies, I think things that were raised about rent stabilization, as well as some of the things that Artie raised at the end of his conversation about things that we're doing right now in terms of policy, they will meet in room. They'll be in the Azalea room, which is right off the main lobby here. Okay. And for folks who want to do a deeper dive and put that down on thinking more about some of the longer term issues, what are some things about, if we, taking Chris's point, if we're thinking 10 years about the community we want to live in and the intersection of affordable housing and all these other issues, they will be in. Great. All right, are we ready, people? All right, thank you, everyone. We'll get started again. This afternoon, while we were in our breakout sessions, we were joined by some of our county council members, and I want to just thank them so much for coming out this morning, or now this afternoon. We have George Leventhal
who's a Takoma Park resident and on our county council. And Mark Elridge was here. He's somewhere. And also our county council member, Tom Hucker, was here but needed to leave. I also want to recognize that Casa de Maryland was here, or is still here. And yes, Casa de Maryland is back. Thank you. And Jay Green from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs at the county level was also here this morning with us. And did you have a question, sir? Or? Oh, perfect. All right. He's still here. He has a presence. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, everyone, for the panel presentations this morning and for getting to work in the breakout sessions. So for the next little while, what we're going to do is have a quick report out from the 2 breakout sessions, just sort of the top line of what was discussed. We'll have time, we have microphones set up, a short time for some Q&A or comments, thoughts on next steps, and then we will have, because I know my colleagues, staying quiet this long is really hard sometimes, but all of us were listening today, and I wanted to give our city council a chance to give some final thoughts. And as I said, this is the start of a conversation that we will have in our community on affordable housing. But this was also the first of what we hope to be a series of these community conversations. And the turnout has been wonderful. Your feedback on what went well today, how we can improve these, because we really, given the response we've had today, I think we really want to continue these types of meetings. So with that, who am I turning it over to do the report outs? Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm responsible for the report out for the Azalea Group. We kind of talked about what should our affordable housing goals should be, and we're going to kind of focus on 3 things that were the main points of what we talked about. The first thing that we talked about is we really think that we need a clear definition of what it means to have affordable housing. Beyond income, is that better? Okay. So the first kind of goal we have is to define affordable housing beyond the HUD AMI definition. What does it mean to have affordable housing? What does it mean to be in affordable housing? That kind of thing. The second thing that we talked about mostly is education efforts. Educate renters upon what are their options, what are their safeguards, their protections, kind of what are their options for affordable housing so that they know all the routes, all the laws that they have, the protections that they have. And the third thing we talked about is increasing lobbying and advocating for additional resources not only on the state level but also the local level so that we can create more affordable options for the community. That's it.
Hi, I'm Megan Gallagher. I'm here reporting on Group B. So what is working? Folks in our group thought that the rent stabilization program is working. It is hard for landlords, but these are the natural consequences of a program like this. And so there was a little bit of tension about that discussion. The next thing is that MHP and organizations like MHP, the Montgomery Housing Partnership, are doing important work, and that a lot of lessons can be learned from the strategies that they use for redeveloping existing units and building in the county and other dense places like Takoma Park. Third, I think that people think that right now there is a lot of good local diversity at the micro level in Takoma Park. We have many blocks that have both, multifamily units and single family units, and so thinking about how do we expand that model and build on it and build on those things that are going well. So in terms of what needs to be changed, we came to a point where we thought that there needs to be a broader conversation about housing policy, to not just be focused so much on affordable housing policy, which is incredibly important, but the levers, it's a smaller set of options when you're looking at affordable housing policy. And so we really wanted to encourage Takoma Park to think more broadly. To improve existing efforts, including code enforcement, to provide information both about programs that are available to residents and also information about exactly how we think that population growth in Takoma Park is going to create demands for housing. So do we think that that population growth will be among families with children, or do we think that that population growth is going to, and the demand is really going to be among people who want to age in place, and creating demands for housing among that group? And finally, there was a discussion about the rules around accessory apartments, and whether those rules need to be revisited, whether they reflect the demands and constraints of 10 years ago, and whether they should be looked at for where our population is going now. Finally, there was a discussion about really creative ideas, and so we talked about tiny houses and how we really should explore the potential of kind of building on the way that Takoma Parkers sort of think about simple living, and that this could be a great place to explore an idea like that. That we should look at the development along New Hampshire Avenue and where the Purple Line is being developed as a great a place where we can make our ideals become a reality. And then also to explore the possibility of a local land trust. I think that people became very interested in that, a source for sort of some of that softer funding for projects that are important to the city. And that was it.
Thank you, Megan and Lisa. That was great report outs. I think we'll spend the next about 15 minutes if people have other comments, questions that they'd like to come up and say. You could come to the microphone so it's easier.
So I did hear Megan say, but Lisa not, we both groups had a discussion about the accessory apartment and the rules of the accessory apartment, which the county has a rule, which I brought up, that's they have to be separated by 500 feet. That rule came in 2013. I find that to be very regressive. I also think that, of course, there's problems with adequate public facilities that have to be taken into consideration. I'm not sure everybody here understands what an APF is, but it's your water and your sewer and your capacities for your police, fire, and schools, things that are very important to have a safe and sustainable community. We all pay for those. When you bring more people in, you tax them, and some of them are limited. The water supply and the pipe size and the sewers are a big limitation, and stormwater management's another one. So we have to look to, one, the idea of tiny housing shrinking, or using the density we have. I'm against this 500-foot separation. I'm very much for accessory apartments, with the caveats of the rules that are required to maintain adequate public facilities. But I'm also looking at space, and that space that concerns me in this town is the large amount of paved parking areas. And if we had an incentive or a tax or some way to reward people who don't own vehicles by giving them a housing voucher credit or some kind of refund or rebate, and tithing those who do, and then if you own more than one, it's a little more, you know, you're costing the city more by having that car using the city and our urban area in multiple ways, environmentally, space taking up, and when snowplows have to get through. So some kind of creative system where you're rewarded for using mass transit or alternative transit and not, or even car sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hillary?
Hi. I just wanted to respond to my colleague, brother, co-resident. You know, we get on shaky ground And then I have a quick comment. We get on shaky ground when we start regulating or almost penalizing people for growing economically. You know, I have 2 cars. One is covered up in the driveway and never moves. And then I have a truck I drive around. You know, you can't drive 2 at one time. To start penalizing people for owning more than 1 vehicle when they're already paying double registration and double insurance and all of that, it leans a little bit into what is personal. You know, I think that's shaky ground. I think there'll be pushback on that. And it almost says, well, we will limit how far you can grow. You know, we will limit how far you can grow economically and what you can do with that money. So now if you have a boat in your driveway, or you have how many pairs of shoes in your closet, I mean, it becomes ridiculous. When you start with that, you know, I do think that there should be a way, if people are really using public transportation, of rewarding that. I think that's a good thing. But if you've ever had to take the bus from the Tacoma Metro, where there is no public parking, at 10 p.m. on a snowy night by yourself, you will find out that Montgomery County bus, ride-on bus, does not meet the needs, nor does Metro, of people who have alternative work schedules or work in the middle of the night. So before we start doing things, we should examine the bigger picture of public transportation, not just in Montgomery County, but in this region. That said, you know, rent control is a great thing, but it also in some way, and I'm not a landlord of a multi-unit thing, asks a private property owner to subsidize housing. You don't ask any other industry or any other profession to subsidize anything. You know, you can't say, well, because certain people are of a lower income, then you as a teacher should accept less money. You ask that of private property owners, of landlords. You know, and I wonder about the prudence of that, because there are many people who need, deserve, should have help with housing. Veterans, disabled, single working mothers who are working to make themselves up, single women who are working to grow. Because the most poorest person in the economy in the United States right now is an elderly single woman, you know, who cannot work. And because, or people who are maybe in between jobs who don't happen to have kids, are virtually, there's nothing for them, you know. But that said, there are people who are, you know, and I think that Mr. Aaron pointed this out, people who are benefiting from rent control, who are driving amazingly new, very high-end vehicles, who have all kinds of stuff, and they are able to do that because they're being subsidized by a private property owner. I think affordable housing should be everybody. Homeowners who are middle income are being priced out of Takoma Park. If you got a lot of money, those increases don't get to you. If you don't have a lot of money, you have help. But if you're a middle income person around here, you have virtually no help. And you are paying a lot of property tax to not be represented. And I don't think that that's fair. And it's almost like you're penalized for growing. You're penalized for being able to afford a home. You're penalized for getting the education and working hard to be able to do better. And I don't think that that's fair. And finally, I want to say, and you've heard me, you've seen my emails, there needs to be accountability. I was a renter. I'm in my first home. I deal with unbelievable amounts of garbage. And I don't even want to go graphically into this because I've been clear. But there are certain things that should be disposed of in sanitary ways that wind up from the apartments all around my house on my property. Where is the accountability? You know, you live in a property, pick up after yourself, take care of it. And it can't just be code enforcement. We don't have the resources to police every can that drops on the ground. We need to have people that have a personal investment in places they live because they don't want to be exposed to it. Because they don't want to look at dead furniture when they go out to empty their trash. Because they don't want to look at used condoms when they get in their car. And that's what's happening. And I can't get code enforcement out 24/7 to do things that when you live in a place that impacts your health and your sanitation and your family, you know, you can't hire enough cops to take care of all of it. It has to be community investment. You know, and there is a big chasm between property owners, mid-level property owners, and people who live around apartments. There's a huge chasm. So I'm sorry to be so long-winded. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hillary. All right. Was there anyone else who would like to? We have a few more minutes. Margaret? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I just want to applaud everyone. You know, you, Mayor Stewart, I'm used to calling you Kate, so I have to adjust. The city council members, congratulations to the new members, everyone that attended. Thank you so much, and I hope that we continue to have these community conversations. I'm not going to be long. I just really want to say that when we were in our meeting, excuse me, I think it was the Azalea Room, there was like a mental telepathy that was going on, because at the end of the day, we suggested trying to have landlords and tenants come together, stakeholders. There was a gentleman, I think off at the top, he was like, you know, we need to have stakeholders, and the stakeholders being tenants and landlords in terms of this discussion about affordable housing. And at the end, we were like, listen, you know, we're all for progress. We don't need to have class warfare. You get what I'm saying? But we're all not equal. 5 hands, one hand, all fingers are not equal, right? But to the extent, and let me just say that the federal government subsidizes states on down, so subsidies all over the place, right? But at the end of the day, we said, landlords, if there are expenses that you're incurring to maintain the property, maybe the city as well as the county and even on the state level can educate you about resources that are available to you to help you offset the expenses. And, you know, just to educate each other, tenants can say, these are my concerns. Why is it that maybe you can't fix this right away? And the landlord would say, hey, you know, I don't have the money. And then just have a conversation, have that dialogue, engage each other. We don't have to be adversarial to maintain affordable housing in the city of Takoma Park. And I think it's applaudable that you guys want to maintain diversity, because where do people go when they can't afford their rent or they start getting squeezed out? And it doesn't have to be, you have to be pro-business. I'm all for the capitalistic model, but let's try to have some equity and some balance and be considerate of those, the least amongst us, or those that are not able to afford it. So I just hope that we keep that, you know, at the forefront of our mind as we go forward and trying to find really viable solutions to address affordable housing. So thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Now I will turn it over to my colleagues for any final remarks. You just want to go ahead, Peter. We can just go down the road.
Thank you for that, and thanks to the mayor and the staff for setting this up. And I want to echo the recent comments. I hope we do more of these on other topics too. Just a few reactions. Listening to all the presentations about things that the city's already doing, I was very proud to hear what we're doing and to see that we have a lot of activity already taking place on affordable housing. But I was also struck, and I mentioned this in the breakout room, I was struck by the fact that our average rent level is lower than the average in the county, and our average home ownership value is higher than the average in the county. So in the city, we've got this real split taking place, and I think we have to do something to find more ways to get affordable housing, not just on a renting basis, but also for less expensive versions of home ownership. And I think both of those things have to be explored. And to me, that means, number one, any future development we do, and maybe we need to be more aggressively in trying to find ways to get this, that there should be requirements for affordable housing to be part of that. And that could be both rental options and home ownership. So I think we need to do that. There was a lot of discussion, and people mentioned about these smaller options and the accessory units and so on. I do think, you know, I've worked with the Village of Takoma Park, which is trying to help people age in the community. We should explore more actively some of those options for smaller, and I don't think they're smaller ideas, but ideas that focus on smaller housing. But then some broader ideas like maybe the city should have its own revolving trust fund. It would be small to start, but to help promote affordable housing. And maybe we should have our own vouchers that could be used perhaps just within the city limits to you know, help us get there. And then the last thing I would just say is, because of the split in the rent and home ownership sections of the city, we have a divide that's geographical too, and so that goes in some ways beyond housing. But I think through, for example, having committee official city meetings in different places instead of just in this building, and translation services that I've talked about before, we need to do more to try to bridge the gaps sort of socially and culturally, in addition to
purely in terms of housing. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Tim Mail, Ward 2. This is a great discussion. My family looked at me somewhat strangely that I was going off to a 4 or 5 hour meeting on a Saturday, but I'm happy to be here. And I, like Peter, hope we do more of these conversations, because when we get into this degree of depth is when we can really start seeing solutions, and when, as Margaret referenced, you start having the potential for people who initially may express different views or prioritize different ideas, for them to start seeing more common ground. And it's going to have to be that if we're going to work to make some of these changes happen, that it's together as a government, as a community, as a county and a state to try to make some changes. So I want to just mention a few things, a couple of specific things that came out of the Azalea Room discussion that I think are very actionable. One was a conversation about retaliatory behavior by landlords, and trying to get a small change in state law so that the city could take action to protect renters from retaliatory behavior. That's something we can work on to fix, that we can get champions to work on at the state legislature. Second, the question came up about county levels of county funding within the overall county budget, as well as state budget for expanding housing and improvements to housing. The city pays for a lobbyist in Annapolis. We could put a similar level of attention into the county budget, and just paying attention to how we can work closely with the county on issues of housing, including budget support for housing solutions. The third is a little bit less specific, but I didn't want it to not get mentioned, which is that the conversation is about affordable housing, but it's also about high-quality affordable housing. And so many people in our discussion brought up the issue of whether it's pests or improvements in the building or utilities, that there are really important quality of life issues associated with that housing that matter. Maybe just a close second to the fact that it's affordable. More broadly, I think at some point, and this came up during the whole discussion, we need to think about the opportunities and the solutions for a separate set of components. So single-family homes, affordable single-family homes and homeownership are, I think, part of the community's goal. So what solutions will help us in that space? Maintaining affordable rent and high-quality units in accessory apartments and essentially basement apartments. So that may only be, 10% of our households are in those places or less, but it's still important to deal with accessory units. And we had comments about those issues and probably different solutions for accessory units. And then rental buildings that are large multifamily buildings, and what sort of solutions do we work on there? And finally, the issue of condos and buildings that were apartment buildings now being turned into condos. What sort of solutions do we focus on in that space? I think ultimately we need to think about all 4 of those categories as being part of affordable, high-quality housing in Takoma Park. And then lastly, the issue of new. So, where do we get new housing, new affordable housing? From my perspective on City Council, this council, many previous councils, have a history of trying to make clear to the county, to developers and others, that the University Avenue corridor and New Hampshire Avenue corridor are great places to expand mixed-use, retail first-story or commercial first-story, multifamily buildings, second, third, fourth stories along those corridors. Purple Line is, I think, essentially a reality now in some form. And we've tried to do everything we can to put the planning and context in place to make that possible. And so I would just say that I, and I think probably some of my colleagues, welcome ideas on how to turn that potential into something that becomes real. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I just have to thank Director Daines, the city manager, and the city staff, and also our leader, our mayor, who took the lead on this issue, because this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. 2+ years ago, my family and I decided to move here. We moved here because of this place's diversity, and we talked about this in the hydrangea room. Diversity often is talked about in terms of race or color or ethnicity, but I think it's socioeconomic diversity. It's what I think Rolf talked about in our room, which is, I love the fact that you can drive down any of the blocks in the city and there are different types of houses. There's different sizes and different types of housing, as opposed to just one cookie cutter sort of development where everything looks the same. And that's what makes this community so great, but it's important that we do everything in our power. I think this day is a testament to it, to ensure that we maintain those values that we care so deeply about here. I care about affordable housing, and I think everybody agrees it's across the board, whether it be affordable housing at the rental level or at the home ownership level. I think I have already spoken to a few of our panelists about how we as a city and with our colleagues who are here from the county can incentivize those renters in the city to become homeowners in this city. And one thing that I will share with folks, and I don't think people know this, but I rent my home, and I want to buy in this city. And I think Ralph also talked about this, about how we have a system in the city of an aging population and folks that don't want to be pushed out. Some of those folks that I want in the city that are aging are my own parents. My parents are on the verge of retirement, and we often talk about them coming here and being closer to their grandchildren. So I think this idea of affordable housing, as it cuts across income levels, age levels, we need to approach it in a multifaceted way. Another point that came up in the hydrangea room is Ms. Price talked about rent stabilization. I've spoken to a number of people who are proponents of rent stabilization, who benefit from rent stabilization, but also can talk about instances where people are taking advantage of rent stabilization. So I think it's important that we can be supporters, but also ensure that those people who need the rent stabilized apartments are the ones who are getting them, and that there's not folks taking advantage of the current system. And then finally, this idea of accessorizing apartments, and County Councilman Mark Ulrich was there, and he talked about what is the impact of accessorizing to schools. I have 2 young kids that I want to go to the schools in this city, and I will be starting to next year. And we had somebody from Montgomery County here a few weeks ago talk about how over capacity our schools are. So there's a lot of things that we need to weigh here, but frankly, from my perspective, what's been key is the wealth of information that we've learned. And I hope that all of you will continue to be advocates on this issue, as will we. But I thank you very much for being here today on this beautiful Saturday morning, so thanks.
Well, I'd also like to thank all of you for coming here on a Saturday and being here with us and talking about this important issue. Also thank Mayor Stewart and city staff for bringing us all together, and I think they've done an excellent job. You know, it's hard for me to think of one community in the Washington metropolitan area that isn't diverse. So I don't think affordable housing is what's bringing all the diversity to Takoma Park. But it does bring the economic diversity. We have rent stabilization program. Our community is located inside the Beltway, you know, around Washington, D.C., capital of the world. It's a very expensive place to live. But our rent stabilization program through the years has done an excellent job of providing affordable housing for renters. And so as we think about what we want and how we move in the future to you know, keep affordable housing in this area, I don't think we've done such a good job of affordability for home ownership. And that's certainly a major area we need to talk about. I think we've heard today not just the statistics that show that rent stabilization has worked in the rental housing market, but we've also heard some of the problems with rent stabilization. And so I think it's healthy for the community to talk about those problems and what changes we can make to alleviate those conditions. One thing that I did hear today in talking about you know, affordable housing in the county was how vouchers provide a great resource for those who need. But from what I've seen, and I'm sure you've all read in the papers, you know, the size of those vouchers is decreasing. The waiting list is growing of people who need that. And those who do receive the vouchers are the amount is being decreased every year. So that program is not a solution at this point. Again, I'm really happy to see this discussion, and I look forward to continued work on this. I think it's, from my experience on the council, it isn't something we're going to do overnight. It's going to take a lot of community discussions. I'm happy that you all came today. I'm disappointed to see so many empty chairs and so many segments of the community that aren't here today. So we need to have more of these discussions and get more people involved. Thank you.
Jared Smith, Ward 5. Let me first say that affordable housing is one of the most important issues, I think, for our region. The cost of living is just going to continue to grow up in Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Northern Virginia. So how do we figure out how people can continue to live here? I mean, it's almost becoming a tale of two cities. You know, you have very wealthy people, and then you have people that are trying to work every day to live in not just Takoma Park, but all over our region. I think this forum came out of a candidate talk that was at Essex House that the mayor and I attended. So I want to thank the mayor for following through and putting on this forum. Before I was elected to the council, I was on the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, and it's a quasi-judiciary body that, you know, tries to resolve issues between landlords and tenants. And I was on that body for many, many years. And one thing that, after today's meeting, that concerns me is the same things that we talked about on COLTA are the issues that we're talking about here. The area in affordable housing that I have seen that works, that I want to figure out how do we replicate in Takoma Park, is the nonprofit ownership through MHP and CPDC. They have come in and bought properties that may have been in poor condition. They have invested dollars that came from the public sector through the county, through the state, and other organizations that are mission-based, and they have improved these properties. There's a lot of properties in Takoma Park that have not seen any improvements. Some of these properties, I would compare them to third world conditions. So how do we fix it, right? How do we make sure that wherever you live in Takoma Park, if you rent a property, your quality of life is the same as somebody that lives in a multi-million-dollar house in Ward 1? Why is it that we have properties where the plumbing doesn't work, or their pinhole leaks, or their HVAC systems don't work? This goes on and on and on in the city of Takoma Park. So the conclusion that I have come to is that we need to do more with rent stabilization, not just make it what it currently is, a paper program, but the city needs to direct a fund so that we can figure out how these smaller landlords can improve their properties. Because it doesn't make any sense that if you live in Ward 5, if you live in Ward 3, you live in Ward 4, your quality of life is so poor. And the city has many types of programs. We use code enforcement. We try to do all these things to help fix these problems. But the one thing that we can't fix, we cannot tell people how to spend their money if they don't have any money. And landlords say time and time again in Takoma Park, they do not have money to improve their properties. I can't say if they do have money, I can't say if they don't have money. But all I know is, as a resident of this city, you should not live in a poor quality of housing. That doesn't make any sense for me. So the city needs to decide that we need to put together a fund, hopefully with some support from the county and the state, so that we can spend our own dollars on making sure that our residents have the same type of quality of life. Thank you.
I guess since I'm last, I'm going to have to really do a nice summary of what everybody thinks, but I'm not. Sorry. Just to be from a personal point of view, Nancy, my wife, and I have lived in Takoma Park in our house in Ward 6 since 1986. We are both in our 70s, so we are on a fixed income, notwithstanding the huge salary I get from the city of Takoma Park.
You do.
So that means, but nevertheless, we're on a fixed income. We bought our house for $100,000. Today, I guess it's hard to say, but I guess it's worth perhaps about $500,000. And we pay over $5,000 annually in property taxes. My point is that we could not now afford to buy our house. And I dare say we would be very, very much stretched to be able to afford to buy a decent house, whatever you want to think that means, in Takoma Park at today's prices. So I feel fortunate that we got in when we did, but when we bought that house, we could afford it, and it was all we could afford. It was a stretch. One of the things that impresses me is the handout here, which has a map of census tracts, census block groups, and the range that you have one census block group where the median family income is $162,000 a year, and quite next to it, practically, is another census block where the median family income is $49,000 a year. When you think about that and you put that in the context that we're a city of just 17,000 people, that's incredible that we're able to have that range of people living in our city. I think we should be proud of that fact, but we also have to realize that we are, in fact, a very small town in a very large county, pressured on all sides by the economies of the entire county and the District of Columbia. But I think we sort of feel like at times we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth in terms of keeping housing affordable here and the diversity. But we're not a wealthy city by any stretch of the imagination. I think sometimes the image from the outside is that, we're pretty well off, and that's not the case. But some of the things that we can talk about in this regard is that we do have rent stabilization. We have a unique form of housing that's not replicated anywhere else that I know, called owner-occupied group homes, which are a regulated form of housing, which in the old days we would call them boarding houses. And they allow people to have some of the most affordable rental units in the city. But I'm not sure that it works the way it should, and it can be improved. We have organizations, nonprofits like MHP, who are buying rent properties and bringing them up to really high standards and doing it exempt in some cases from rent control in the city. And they're getting ready to buy another property, a large property in the city in the next couple weeks. One of the things, though, we're not talked about yet is that we have a huge diversity of landlords, ranging from companies that own very large apartment buildings down to the very smallest housing units in the city. But I want people to realize that, but with rent stabilization, basically, we treat all of them the same, okay? But these are the investors that have invested in residential real estate in the city. And we cannot have any affordable housing in the city without these investors. So I think we need to pay much closer attention to the diversity of landlords, because they provide the diversity of housing, which a lot of which is affordable, and more of it could be made more affordable, and we cannot do it without them. And we had one person on the panel here today on this stage talking about the landlord's perspective, and I learned a good bit just from listening to Mr. Aaron from that. And I just think this is an area that when we talk about diversity, we need to be talking about diversity of landlords and how we can help them be better landlords and invest in their properties. So that means to me that we need to revisit rent stabilization and figure out how we can make it better, work better for them, so that it works better for the city and for tenants. The last thing I want to say is that if we're going to be enlarging our housing stock in the city, the place where we're going to be able to do it, when I say we, I mean just talking about the community at large, is New Hampshire Avenue. Most of the city, there's not an opportunity to build much in the way of big buildings without creating a lot of controversy and pushback. But on New Hampshire Avenue, there is gobs of asphalt that is sitting there that collecting stormwater, and buildings that are underdeveloped that need to be can be redeveloped at a much higher density of mixed use, all up and down New Hampshire Avenue. And I think what I want to see, and I've been pushing very hard on this myself, is that the city needs to be we need to be aggressive about finding developers who are interested in building housing on New Hampshire Avenue. And I think that housing can be definitely built in a way that would fall into the realm of affordability. Not that that's the only thing we should be talking about. We want to have a diversity of housing. There needs to be market rate housing too, so that we maintain our diversity. But that's one of the areas I really like to see us do some serious work. That's all I want to say.
Great, terrific, thank you. Thank you to everyone on the City Council. So we ran a little over, but not by too much. I want to thank everyone who came today, and just a couple of reminders. All the presentations that were given today are on the webpage, on the city website, under Initiatives, Community Conversations. We are also videotaping the entire day today, and so that will also be available to go back and look at. And please turn in some comments. You can do that today, or go to the website at any time and put in questions or comments. And as we move forward in pulling together all of these ideas, we will be going back to that. I just want to say again, a thanks to our county council members who were here this afternoon. I think it's, our partnership is going to be incredibly important as we move forward in all of this. And for you all to take the time out of your busy schedules on a Saturday to come and hear the residents and hear us on the City Council talk, we very much appreciate it. And we'll come to Rockville too. So today, as we close, I think the big question as we started the day, and we were reminded throughout, is where do we want to be 5 to 10 years? Affordable housing, our housing conversation, is a huge part of what that vision is going to be about. And so today was a beginning. It was a start to answer that question, to think about what are some of the policies, priorities, and goals we have in place now, and how do we need to change those, and what do we want to be working towards. Takoma Park, as my colleagues have said, there are 17,000 people here. We're about 2.4 square miles. We're not that big of a place, but we have enough people here, we have the diversity, and we like to do things a little different and be on the cutting edge. And I think on housing, we can definitely do that. So thank you all for coming. I look forward in continuing this conversation, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.